Hi, everyone, and welcome to Search Sessions. We're so excited to have you join us today. I am Christine Pratt, our Director of Content here at Boostability, and I'll be hosting our show today. It's a great show, and we're so excited to have you here. So we created Search Sessions, and it's a dedicated series to help small businesses position themselves for success, no matter the industry or the location. Every show has expert guests, business strategists, industry leaders to provide key advice and insights that you can apply to elevate your business to the next level. And in today's Search Sessions, we're going to be talking about the importance of local listings and why they matter so much now, especially after the pandemic. Listing your business can be a huge for local search traffic, and it can really make a difference for your business. So today we'll hear from industry expert Greg Sterling, VP of Market Insights at Uberall. So Greg, thanks for being here.
Of course, my pleasure. And my hair is here too, in case you hadn't noticed that.
Oh, it's looking great.
It doesn't look like the picture at all.
You're looking good. It's the COVID hair, right?
Yeah, exactly. 70s hair today.
Yes, and we'll also hear from our SEO expert, Maya Teagle, about how local listings and local SEO work together. So we have a ton to cover, and we're just going to get started and jump into today's agenda. So first, I'll give some introductions into Uberall and Greg and Boostability in general. And then we'll hand it over to Greg to talk about the growth of local search and really the value of listings management, and then details into this really big study that Uberall did. It's 115,000 small businesses across Europe and North America, and show how they achieve success with consistent listings management. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about local listings and local SEO and how they can really help your business grow with Maya. And then lastly, we'll get into your Q&A and answer any of your questions that you submit during the show. So you can do that through the chat feature and the Q&A feature here on Zoom. I'll be monitoring both of those throughout our talk. So to introduce Greg and to Uberall, Uberall helps your business or your company stand out in local search and improve your customers' brand experience for better online visibility, more clicks, and more sales. Uberall delivers a memorable near me brand experience for SMB and enterprise resellers to offer clients at every step of the customer journey, from online interactions to offline sales. And Greg, he is the VP of Market Insights for Uberall. He is a recognized expert on a range of topics across digital marketing, including SMB, SaaS, and local marketing. He was a contributing editor for Search Engine Land for 14 years. And before Uberall, Greg was the VP of Strategy for Trade Association LSA, which is now Locology. And before that, he held analyst and executive roles at Opus Research, the Kelsey Group, allbusiness.com, and Tech TV. He's regularly been quoted in leading publications like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Forbes, the Washington Post, USA Today, and others. And prior to entering the world of digital media, he was an attorney and practiced civil litigation in San Francisco. So we're so glad to have Greg here today with us. And here at Boostability, we are the global leader in small business and partner-focused white label SEO. We offer affordable SEO specifically designed to meet the needs of small to medium-sized businesses. Our proprietary technology Launchpad tracks over 2.3 million keywords every month, which enables us to make strategic SEO decisions based on millions of bits of information. And not only that, but we serve customers and partners around the world. Right now, we're in 15 countries, service in 9 languages, and continue to expand every year. We get 86% of our customers on the first page of Google within 6 months, and got 78,000 plus keywords on page 1 for our customers on Google in 2020. And overall, we are dedicated to helping small businesses succeed online. So that gives you a little bit of an introduction into us. And now we want to send it over to Greg to learn about the data collected from Uberall and why local listings are so important. So Greg, over to you.
All right, well, great. Thanks, Christine, and thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. Happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. And let's get into it. So one of the things that I think is really important for context is for people to understand what's happened with local search in the COVID period and now as we hopefully emerge from it. So there's been a story that everybody on this webinar is familiar with, which is the rise of e-commerce and the significant growth of online purchasing. That is, as always, sort of juxtaposed with offline buying, right? So it's like what percentage of retail is e-commerce versus in-store shopping. And there's a more complicated story there, but the thing that I want to remind people is that during COVID, these local searches, these near me queries didn't go away. So what you see on the left is the growth of near me search over time. This is Google data. And then on the right, it's during COVID. So people were still very much looking for products and services in their area during COVID, even as e-commerce experienced double and triple digit growth. And the more complicated story is that stores can fulfill e-commerce. Often people are looking to buy things from local businesses online. But local search is as important today or more important than ever. So on the next slide, we have a bunch of Google data also that shows the growth of local search and momentum of near me lookups. This is during COVID. It's actually 2019 through the end of last year. So lots of searches for home delivery, curbside pickup, in stock, where to buy something near me, what's open near me. There's more of this. This is just a few representative examples. So local search and people looking for things in their local area is as big or bigger in many cases than it was before COVID. And also people are very much looking to support and buy from small businesses. And Google, I think, said that how to support small business and queries that were like that grew by something like 2,000% during 2020. So people very focused on the local market, even as they're buying more stuff online. It's which kind of a paradox. Next slide, please. A few definitions so that I can just refer to things sort of in acronym form going forward. Many people on this call may know some of these things already, but just in the event that you don't, NAP is name, address, and phone number. Citations, often used interchangeably with listings, but it may be slightly different. Citations is any third-party mention of a business. Often that takes the form of the name, address, and phone number. Sometimes it's a link to the business. Business listings are all the information about a business that's available online. Listings management is the active management of that information, the syndication of it to different places online, the editing, the claiming, and then NAP consistency, to close this out, is just as it says, the fact that the information that appears in different places, different directories, different apps is the same address, the same business name, the same hours of operation, phone number, URLs, and so on and so forth. So historically, listings management or citation management has been a foundational local SEO tactic. Name, address, and phone number consistency has sometimes also been called backlinks for local. For SEO people out there, this is a tool that Google has historically used to verify the existence and legitimacy of businesses. And so listings management has been very important historically. Back roughly 7 years ago, it was regarded as the #1 local ranking factor. So the listings consistency, NAP consistency, many SEOs saw this as the most important thing to focus on in order to rank in Google and the Google local pack for local queries. Some of you have seen these charts. There are 1,000 of them in Google Images, and I just pulled a few here to illustrate a point, which is there has been a kind of convoluted data exchange system behind the scenes. People sending data to one another, retrieving data from third-party sources, and this is why it's a complicated system, and this is why historically business listings consistency has been such a big issue, because there's so many sources of data that are being used all the time, and Google was ingesting so many feeds from so many sources and having to reconcile those and figure out which are the authoritative ones. So it really required an active management of that business information data to ensure that it was correct, because periodically it was being overwritten, errors could be reintroduced into the system, and it was just a kind of a mess on the back end, as these graphics suggest. And this is just another version of some of the stuff on the previous slide. There's a network of hundreds or thousands of publishers out there. Well, it's not a formal network, but there are a lot of different publisher sites, apps, directories of different kinds in different verticals, and managing business data across these different sites was an important function. However, as the next slide will illustrate, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Another reason to do this, no, you can go back, you can go to the forward, thanks. Another reason to do this is because, beyond whatever ranking impact it has, this is really the bottom line, is you want your customers to see consistent information. You want them to have a uniform customer experience. So you don't want somebody to go to Google and see one set of information about your business and go to Facebook or go to Yelp or go to TripAdvisor or Zillow or whatever site and see something different, right? A wrong phone number or an incorrect address. So this is sort of a fundamental piece, and this goes to your brand. You want there to be a consistent presentation of information. And historically, if you weren't actively managing your own business data, somebody was doing it for you, because Google and other sites' objective is to really present comprehensive information. And they were getting this information from all these different third parties who were selling it to them or syndicating it to them. And without the active involvement of the business itself, often there would be incorrect information. But in the intervening period of time, some things have changed. So Google used to rely pretty heavily on third parties to make those authoritative determinations about what was accurate about your business. In the past, let's call it 7, 8, 10 years, Google has started to rely much more heavily on its own data, meaning businesses claiming their Google My Business listing and the data that Google has directly from these business owners, which makes a lot of sense from a Google perspective. And many of the third-party sites that used to be authoritative or that used to see a lot of traffic, consumer traffic, have really declined in visibility or disappeared in some cases. I mean, for example, City Search and MapQuest used to be top-tier sites that people would go to for local business information. That's not true anymore. Many of the internet yellow pages sites that used to have substantial traffic, that's not true anymore. So we've seen a sort of shrinking universe of consumer destinations online. Some of you may be familiar with what's called the local ranking factors survey. It's done every year. It was started by a guy named David Nim, and started in the mid 2000s, maybe even earlier. And it's essentially a survey of local SEO practitioners and professionals, people that are leaders in the space. And it's a pretty elaborate survey of all the different variables that impact ranking on Google. And so it attempts to establish a consensus around some of those factors. And I'm going to just show you a couple of quick slides. It's pretty extensive. In the most recent one was run by a company called Whitespark, and you can go to whitespark.ca and find it, or just do 2020 local search ranking factors. So citations or business listings has diminished in importance over time. So as I say here, in the intervening 6 or 7 years since it was regarded as the #1 ranking factor, it's now seen as a smaller contributor to ranking in the local pack. So it went from #1 to #6. On the next slide, you can see over time how that's gone down. So here are some top level various ranking factors: Google My Business reviews, on-page signals, third-party links, behavioral data, citations, and personalization. Citations has gone down, Google My Business has gone up, and reviews have gone up greatly. And again, this is perception. This is not data from Google, but this is informed perception by a bunch of experts who do this on a daily basis. So it's directionally pretty reliable, if not exact. So we're now in a situation where many SEOs, local SEOs are saying, does it make sense to do citation or listings management anymore when Google is placing so much emphasis on Google My Business? And there are only sort of maybe a handful of top tier sites that you need to pay attention to. Do we really need to do this kind of broad management of data across a network of directories and apps? So this is a question and a debate that's happening in the industry right now. And so we decided to do a study to answer that question. And but before I get into the data on that, just a couple of kind of larger points here. So there's broad consensus that on places like Google, Facebook, Yelp, Apple Maps, and Bing, everybody wants to be present. There's no question. You want your data to be accurate and complete on those sites. These are big consumer destinations. And then there are verticals, industry sites or consumer portals that are visited in particular areas like travel or restaurants or real estate or healthcare. There's no question that for particular businesses that operate in those industries, you want to be present on these sites because this is where consumers are doing a lot of business. But then what about data aggregators? What about companies that are capturing a lot of local data, local business data, franchises, small business data, and sending that out all over the place? And then there are other sites like Nextdoor and some others that may be worth paying attention to. Nextdoor is definitely worth paying attention to, by the way. So let's now get into a discussion of the study. So the central question was not whether these top tier core sites really matter, but does this syndication to this kind of diaspora, if you will, of local sites, directories, and sites matter? Is there going to be any impact on search visibility, meaning on Google, and consumer engagement? And there are a lot of sort of indexes of top X number of sites. In this particular case, it's 100 sites. Do you need to be on 100 sites? This is the discussion that's happening. So what we did is we looked at 115,000 enterprise and small business locations. And Christine said it was all small businesses. It's actually a mix. In the US and Europe, Uberall has a lot of customers in Europe. And we wanted to see the impact we wanted to answer this question: does the long tail matter? Does this extended directory distribution matter to Google visibility in particular? And in this context, we measured search visibility and then also consumer engagement or consumer actions, which are calls, clicks to the website, and requests for directions. And here you can see some information about the study. This was a very, very challenging study to do for various reasons, which I won't get into, just because it's just a lot of unwieldy information here. What we did, though, is we created a control group that focused on 4 primary sites: Google, Facebook, Apple Maps, and Bing. Yelp is not in this group because Yelp really doesn't matter in Europe. So we decided to create this consistent control group across the 2 geographies. And then there was an extended network that included a lot more directories in the experimental group. So the control group is just the 4. The experimental group includes the 4: Google, Facebook, Apple Maps, and Bing, and an extended network. And there were roughly 70 total directories across the US and Europe. So I know I keep teasing you. I keep telling you I'm going to get into the data, and then there's these other slides. But just really quickly, what does Google say about ranking? So Google gives explicit advice for those that haven't seen it. The link is down there. Explicit advice about what you can do to improve your local visibility, your visibility in the local pack on Google. Claim and complete your profile, add complete information, manage and respond to reviews, very important. We're not talking about reviews so much here. This is worthy of an entire webinar on its own, but it's really important. Photos, increasingly important. Then they talk about 3 kind of ranking variables: relevance, distance, and prominence. And relevance is relevance to the query. If you're looking for somebody to put a roof on your house, you're going to see companies that do that. That's sort of a straightforward concept. Proximity or distance is the distance from you to the business, and this comes into play when you do something like best Mexican food near me or closest pharmacy to me. And then the rankings will be impacted by that. And then on the next slide, I talk a little bit about prominence, which is a kind of kitchen sink category where Google throws in a lot of different stuff. They're going to look at your organic SEO rankings. They're going to look at your review counts and your score. And then they're going to look at a bunch of other stuff like links, third-party mentions, and directories. So Google is explicitly saying that they still care about citations and listings across the internet. It's less of a signal than it used to be, but they're telling people, yes, it still matters, in addition to these other variables.
Let's be real. If Google says that it's relevant, it's going to be relevant across the board. What Google says, I think everybody will follow and take note of.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of unprecedented because they don't really talk about their algorithm at all. They don't say, here are the variables that we're looking at in order to determine what ranks. And they're doing that in a local context because they want to help local business owners, smaller businesses. They want to give guidance. So this is kind of an unprecedented thing for them to do. And they're not, BSing anybody. They're saying these are the things, as you say, Christine, that matter. So let's go to the next slide. So now I'm getting into the meat of the study. So again, we have Europe data and North American or US data. I'm not going to talk so much about the European data, although there are a couple of slides that mention it. But this is the US data. So what we saw, the kind of bottom line is that when you had 10 or more sites, and it goes up, I said there were 70 total directories. When you move from the core group of 4 to more than 10, there was a significant lift in search visibility in the local pack. There was also an improvement in consumer actions, again, calls, clicks, and directions requests. And then when you got beyond 30 directories, it improved. So as you go up to broader distribution, this lift, increase in visibility and increased engagement improves. And then also as a sort of a separate matter, profile completeness, meaning you've claimed and you've populated your profile with information, also improved consumer actions, increases trust, and people are responding to that. This goes to the profile completeness point that I just made. So this is more granular detail on that. The breakdown of the number of locations, the region, and then the improvement with directions, calls, and clicks for both jurisdictions. So this slide is on search visibility. The next slide is on engagement. So you can see the blue is the core group, the control group, and the red bars are the extended network. This is 10 plus directories. And you can see that in each case where you have basically branded and unbranded search and Google Maps, you can see improvement when you extend the listings distribution to the broader network. So and this is all about Google. This is all about ranking on Google in the Google local pack. So these third-party directories are helping give credibility and visibility to the business listings. So the next slide is about engagement. Again, calls, clicks, and directions requests. Same phenomenon. Improved directions, improved calls, and improved clicks when the listings were distributed on at least 10 directory sites beyond the core group. This is a little bit more difficult to sort of get at a glance, but the principle here is that as you expand the distribution further out from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 and beyond, there is a point at which it's sort of there's a diminishing returns. But basically, as you expand to a broader network of sites and apps, you see a corresponding benefit, branded search and unbranded search. And when I use those terms, Google has more nuanced definitions, but basically, the branded search is somebody looking for your business or the products that they sell, specific products that they sell that happen to be carried at your business. Unbranded search, which is where the bulk of the volume is people doing category searches. So, best roofer, Sacramento, California, or, gyms under $200 a month or whatever. which is something I'm in the market for. Less than $200 a month, I can assure you. Anyway, that's where the search volume resides. It's people doing these category searches where they don't have a particular business or brand in mind, and that's where you really want to appear. And there's a lot of benefit. Your visibility improves in that context in particular.
Yeah, I think it's especially important for those who are doing research. I mean, we do those all the time, like, best running shoes for
Yep.
someone who is training for a marathon or something. Right then, you're starting to just do the research into it, and so if your business is showing up, that's going to help.
Exactly. Top of the so-called purchase funnel, where people don't know what they're looking for, or they have a vague sense. They don't know who carries something. They don't know where they can fulfill their need. That's where you really want to maximize your visibility. And what we found in this study is that extended distribution does provide a significant lift there. So I've got three short case studies here, just conclusory data. There's a lot more behind this, but I don't want to sort of dive into them too deeply because we're limited on our time. These are all European examples because we have a lot of direct customer relationships in Europe that we can draw upon. Yves Rocher is a retailer, and when they did this kind of listings optimization, which they may also be doing they may also be doing review management here, so that may be playing into this. So I don't want to say this is exclusively listings optimization or listing syndication, but it's a piece of probably a larger strategy. But they saw significant improvement across these measures by managing their listings across the network. And again, I believe that review management is in here as well, which is very important. KFC in the UK, similar story, slightly different reporting here. 60% increase in directions clicks, which is obviously a great sign for them. That's a proxy for conversion. Somebody's not going to say, get me to the nearest KFC without probably going in and ordering something. And then they saw a 16% revenue lift from this, which represented a 37x return on their investment. So, very positive outcome for them. And then the third and final example here is a company called Specsavers, which is an eyeglasses retailer, mostly in Europe. This data concerns about 500 of their locations in the Nordics region, and they operate in 12 countries. And they have more than 2,000 locations. So they saw improvement across the board. They're a franchise, and what initially happened when their agency came in is that there was just a mess. There was an inattention to their Google profiles. Their data was outdated in many cases. It was really inconsistent. The remainder of the information on their Google profiles was incomplete. And what happened is that they went in, they claimed everything, they cleaned everything up, they fully built it out, and they made sure that all the information was consistent and accurate. And as a consequence of that, they saw massive improvement across all of these different categories. And one of the more interesting things for anybody who thinks about brand is that they saw a 250% lift in brand searches. So this is helping across the board, not just in terms of customer acquisition for these category searches, but in terms of subsequent brand awareness, building brand awareness, which is maybe not a totally intuitive thing, but very positive outcome for them. And they also saw, data I don't have here, a big revenue jump. So this all sounds like very simple stuff, and in a certain conceptual way it is. For some large organizations, it's very difficult for them to manage their data across a lot of different sites, but it's really, really beneficial. This is a separate, smaller study, just a single slide here that we did as in trying to figure out how we were going to do this larger study. We tested some different things out, and this is just a piece of data, same period of time over the course of a year, 2019 to 2020. Different control group. It had a broader range of distribution: Google, Apple, Bing, Facebook, Foursquare, which is an aggregator here, a mapping company, and Factual, another data aggregator. And then there were the experimental group included them, and then 30 additional sites. And similar outcome, right? So the bottom is number of locations, and then the growth in views, growth in search views. So without adding locations, they saw a significant gain, 23% gain in local search visibility, Google Local Pack, by doing listings management and optimization. So to conclude my portion of this, sort of the big takeaways here, in case they're not self-evident, even as people are talking about e-commerce, consumers are even more engaged at the local level than they were before COVID. And so it's really important to pay attention to your local information. If you're a franchise or a multi-location brand, this is where the customer encounters the brand primarily, is at the local level. And obviously that's true if you're a smaller business with fewer locations or a single location or a service area business. While listings and citation consistency is not the top local ranking factor anymore, Google still places value on it, still places an emphasis on it. And as we saw from the study, active management of business location data across a network is going to provide a significant benefit in terms of search visibility and consumer engagement. The two are obviously related. People can engage with your business if they don't find it, but it's important to show that not only are you showing up, but people are interacting with the business information. And then that all translates directly into revenue. So it's a very practical and tangible thing. So there's, search visibility translates into bottom line benefits. And with that, I'm going to send it back to you, Christine.
Great. Thanks, Greg. As you can really see, I mean, all these case studies that you showcase, like these people had double, triple digit growth in so many areas just from better managing their local listings.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing that something relatively simple like that, I mean, it's not simple to execute in some of these cases, had such a powerful impact. But it goes to the importance of Google now in the market, and how so much is at stake with having your business data right on Google.
Yeah, for sure. And we're getting a lot of questions about just like maximizing that reach. I mean, if you're getting found on Google, great. But I mean, people don't just search on Google, they can search anywhere. So it's a matter of being found everywhere people search. So we'll get into that in a little bit here with the Q&A. So thanks again, Greg, for that. And we'll talk to you again in just a second. But for right now, I want to send it over to Maya Teagle, our Boostability SEO manager, to talk us through how local listings really helps you improve your local SEO as well. So Maya, over to you.
Thanks, Christine. And thanks, Greg. That was super informative. And I'm just going to build off it a little bit more and talk about how this all ties into SEO as well. So proximity searches or near me searches have become more prominent with the increased use of mobile devices and information just being readily accessible right from your smartphone. Uberall actually did a study on local search and found that 82% of shoppers use their phones to conduct near me searches. And with that high of a demand, it's clear that local SEO is necessary for local businesses to stay relevant and competitive in their industries and to capture customers in the areas that are looking for them. So local listings management does have a direct effect on SEO because, one, it provides accurate and consistent information about your business. And that's across all listings that are generated and managed through that software. This includes information, like Greg mentioned, NAP or NAP, which is your business's name, address, and phone number. But this can also include other valuable information like your hours of operation, a link to a website, accessibility information. Are you wheelchair accessible? Are you not? Specific services or products that are offered, and just a lot more. They're expanding that continually, and you have a lot more options just so you can give people information up front. Right from the get-go. So, and having that consistent information and up-to-date information regarding your business helps improve your local SEO. It boosts your EAT, and that's your expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, not just in the eyes of your prospective customers or existing customers, but absolutely in the eyes of search engines. And then to build off that, listings that are optimized, that are accurate and consistent, help improve your overall customer or user experience, which is another factor that is heavily tied to the success of your SEO campaign, regardless of whether it's local or it's national. Your existing and prospective customers should be able to find your information about your business as quickly and as easily as possible. And having an updated listing will give people that information upfront and in one place so they're not hunting for it elsewhere. Can't expect people to do that anymore. It's definitely instant gratification. And if you don't give that information upfront, you run the risk of them seeking it elsewhere, and those chances are it's your competitor. So local businesses do need to meet these standards for EAT, and they must provide a seamless user experience, because if not, this translates to search engines that your website is, one, not trustworthy, and two, it's of a lower quality compared to your local competitors. And if that's the case, your website will be pushed farther down in the search engine results page or SERP, and your competitors will outrank you. And then on the next slide, one of the other benefits, the third benefit, local listings can also provide local businesses with the opportunity to acquire customer reviews that they can then observe and engage with. This is where prominence comes into play, and prominence is a category of the local search ranking guidelines and can help you increase your rankings in map packs and in the organic local search. Online reviews are the second most important ranking factor for increasing your positioning in the local map pack. So it's important to generate those, engage with those, definitely respond to them. So obtaining as many authentic positive reviews is the goal, and it improves your business's rankings, reputation, which then translates to an increased trust with prospective customers and search engines. But there's also a silver lining to be had with negative reviews that are, of course, genuine and not spammy. Negative reviews give business owners the opportunity to respond to them and to rectify the issue, therefore restoring that trust with customers and search engines again. So overall, local listings management software is super, super useful. It's an awesome tool for SEOs and for local businesses. It's essential for your local SEO campaign because, one, it simplifies this whole process and makes it much more efficient to keep your business's information up to date. We're always strapped for time, so it's nice when you have a specific section or a dedicated software that helps you cut out a lot of that time that takes to upload photos, update your information, make it as consistent as possible. And that consistency and accurate information is key to succeed in your local search landscape. Back to you, Christine.
Awesome, Maya. And I think that last point about the genuine reviews is one of the most important parts of that, because I mean, I think we've all gotten that, like, hey, give us 5 stars and we'll send you a $5 gift card. Like, it doesn't quite work like that. The genuine factor really matters there.
No, definitely. That's a good point to make, because if you do take that route, giving people something in return for leaving a review, search engines, Google especially, are super smart at sniffing that stuff out, and that can actually work against you and penalize you, devalue your site even more and your listing. So authenticity is key there. And having a few negative reviews does support that authenticity even more. If you have 5 stars across the board, I mean, that's great if that's true. I feel like that's not really the reality of businesses, e-commerce, anything like that. So, and search engines know that. They do take a look into it. And if you have a few of those negative reviews, that's not going to work against you. And just to build off that, we did a search sessions in the past where we talked strictly about online reviews and how does this help your SEO? You might be tempted to remove some of these negative reviews. And there have been some studies to show that if you do that, it can actually work against you. So your best bet is to respond and just be authentic with the person who's leaving that review and they had a bad experience, and just do your best to rectify that situation.
And learn from it and show everyone else that you're learning from it by replying to it. So for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Maya, for that. And now we're going to get into questions. We've got a ton that have been coming in, so we're going to get to as many as possible in the next few minutes. So one I want to start with is just kind of to Greg, why is essentially the perception of local listings as a ranking factor going down? I mean, it was so important back in 2014 and kind of slowly worked its way down, but it's still there. So why is that perception decreasing?
Well, I mean, the perception is decreasing because Google's reliance upon third parties is decreasing. So Google used to rely much, much more heavily on all these third-party sites as a kind of cross-referencing tool. It's kind of a parallel universe to its PageRank linking. You know, I mean, it's way beyond PageRank. But originally, Google looked at who pointed to different websites as the authoritative sources, and so third parties all pointing to the same site created more authority for that particular site. That's the crude version of their original algorithm. And it's kind of a similar thing here, hence the kind of backlinks for local idea. Is if all the third parties in the world agree that your business is, Greg's Pizza and it's at 12345 Main Street, and they see that consistently, then that helps them understand that that's the right information and the right address. So they historically relied on a lot of third parties and the consistency of that information to determine, what they showed the end user, the consumer. But Google has placed, much, much more emphasis in the previous, the last few years on a direct relationship with the business. Google My Business, give us your business data directly, and they weight that more heavily. And certain directories now in the world, as I said, have become less significant. They're not as visited. Google is rebalancing what it emphasizes, but by the same token, it's still looking at those three third-party references and cross-referencing it with its own information. So the study validates that it still matters to manage your listings across an extended network, beyond the fact that people are going to different places to find information.
Okay. Is this kind of because Google's really trying to emphasize GMB and discredit others?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah, Google's preference would be to have every business in the world with a verified GMB account and have a direct relationship with those businesses. That would be that's the objective. But it's obviously not going to get there because there are too many businesses. Google's not easy to work with. People don't know this, and so Google still relies on. Google is looking at tons and tons of signals to figure out which business information they should show, which businesses should be shown for which queries. It's in some ways their algorithms have become more complex. Well, not in some ways. Definitely their algorithms have become more complex over time. But so they're constantly tweaking to try and produce the best result for the consumer.
Okay. So then what does that mean for other search engines, like Bing in particular? That's probably the next biggest one. I mean, did they put as much of an emphasis on local listings as Google, or did they just kind of follow the trend?
Bing has, we didn't study. The study was really focused on the impact of the third-party networks on Google in particular. So we don't have a corresponding data set for Bing, but I would imagine it's comparable, because what Bing has historically done is basically mimicked a lot of Google's moves. Their algorithm may be somewhat different, but Bing has sort of a parallel universe of, they have their own Google My Business equivalent. I forget what it's called. There have been different names over the years, but they basically, you can claim your information and input it there, but they're also looking at third parties, getting data from third parties. And so it's a comparable strategy. And if you're doing listings management across a network, Bing is part of that. I mean, you should, I forget the breakdown. I mean, Google has 90+% of mobile searches and 70% of the desktop, but you still, if you have time, you shouldn't neglect Bing. And if you're using a third party, they will include Bing in that optimization.
Awesome. Okay, that answers those couple of questions. One, we've had a few people writing in saying, what if I'm a home-based e-commerce site? So how do I really establish a strong NAP if I don't necessarily have a local address or something, if I'm entirely online?
Right.
the best way to do that?
Right. So there's two scenarios. One is where you're a true e-commerce business, and you're shipping products anywhere that people are living. And then another is a service area business where you're a plumber, a painter, maybe a consultant. There are definitely advantages to being able to have a local presence. I mean, if you're an accountant and you're willing to service anybody in the United States, in theory, I don't know what the licensing requirements are. That maybe not be a good example. Definitely an advantage to having a local presence. You may not need one if you're a pure e-commerce business. If you're a service area business and you don't have people come to you, then there are things you can do. I mean, I am not an SEO practitioner, meaning that's not the day-to-day substance of my job. But people may or may not know you can suppress your address, and you can designate service areas on Google as you set up your Google My Business listing. And then there are all kinds of other things that people will do for optimization. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to provide some good links that provide instructions on that. And this is something that Boostability also does.
Awesome. Yes, for sure. I'm going to direct this next one over to you. This is from someone who says that they have a membership organization with volunteers who work events nationwide. So I can assume that there's several iterations of this. People that have maybe a local business, but they serve like a national audience in certain circumstances. So how can you really use a local search to help promote that out?
Yeah, to build off what Greg said, you can, if there are specific areas, these offices or service areas that people can go to in those locations where you have those events, you can create Google My Businesses around those and then associate that just under your parent company. If that's not the case though, if you don't have anything that you have like a designated area where people can come visit you or come into the office, I would recommend creating pages on your website that do highlight the localized areas that you're operating in. So it could be kind of like if we were to have a space in St. George, that we would create a spot dedicated on our website that talks about St. George, any of the localized information regarding St. George in there, and then add some schema markup into that to increase your chances of ranking in featured snippets. Any of that would definitely help you, but it is really helpful if you were to have like those other areas across the nation where you're holding your events to create Google My Businesses if you can, but if not, the website route is best.
Yeah, and just to pick up on something that Maya was alluding to, but maybe didn't spell out, you can create local landing pages on your site that address these areas. I mean, she did say that, but there's a whole kind of local landing page optimization strategy that will give you some ability to rank for queries where you can talk about your personnel, your services, the area, as you mentioned, and showcase your work for people in those areas, depending upon what your business is. You can build out pretty rich pages that address that local audience that can be quite effective, even if you don't have a physical presence in a particular market. And Google has all kinds of rules surrounding, like if you use a WeWork or something like that, if you use a lot of people try and cheat this to get a local foothold, but Google has a lot of very specific rules about what the requirements are for you to list a Google My Business address in a particular place using a kind of temporary office space or something like that. You may not need to do that, but people try and do that, and there's some rules that you need to be aware of.
Awesome.
If that made sense.
Yes.
Hopefully it did.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. I think that definitely answered the question. Let's see, we've got a few more. So another one is, I guess I'm going to combine a couple. It's essentially like on the one side you had towards the beginning, Greg, there was maybe 60, 70 different directory logos that were on there. So, I mean, that's an insane amount of necessarily listings to keep track of as a solo business, or, to make sure it's consistent across all of those. You don't want to go through all 60, every single week. That's a lot. So one is someone's asking if there's like a hierarchy list of, maybe the top priority directory listings that you should focus on. And if not, like how essentially do you make sure that you can get listed across all of these consistently?
Right. So here's the point where I give you the sales pitch, but I'm not going to do that. So, there are third-party services that will do that on your behalf. Uberall is one of them. Boostability has this capability as well. What we do in our particular situation is we try and manage. There's a longer discussion about verticalization of this whole environment. Not all directories are going to be relevant for every business. More is better as a crude formulation, but not 100% are going to be relevant. And so what we try and do for our customers is manage that process behind the scenes so the complexity is removed for them. We take their information, we syndicate it out to, these sort of concentric circles of directories in terms of importance. And so we manage that complexity on their behalf. I assume that Boostability does something very similar for its customers.
Yes.
Right. So you can elaborate on that, but it's impossible as a small business owner to do this at any kind of scale. I mean, you can pay attention to a handful of sites, but if you want to sort of go beyond that, it just gets too complicated. And there are people that have success focusing on a limited number of sites. If they don't have a budget, etc. But you can't really expect to do this across the board with very limited time and energy. You really have to use a vendor to be direct about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know Uberall does. Boostability offers that to our small business clients. Definitely. There's a few others out there that I'm aware of, but yeah, to keep track of them across everyone.
Just to clarify, I'm sorry, Christine, I don't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
Just to clarify, Uberall doesn't work directly with small business customers. I'm happy to take any questions offline, provide you with any additional follow-up information. If you're a local business, if you're a small business, you should inquire with Boostability. We don't work directly with small business customers. We're working with multi-location brands.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's see. One more is that I wanted to, I guess, for maybe like a specific industry, I'm thinking like a lawyer or something. Is it worthwhile to get listed on all the legal directories versus just like the generic, 70 plus, yellow pages, all of that? Or is it valuable to go for all of them?
So the more specific to your field, the better. There are certain general directories that are going to have a certain level of authority and value from Google's perspective. There's two situations. One where somebody goes to a site like Avo or law.com or I was a lawyer and I've forgotten all the sites that cover, there's a whole bunch of them, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are people that will go directly to those sites and do searches on those sites. And then there are people who do searches on Google and will click through to those sites. So you want to be present on all the sites where there's any kind of traffic, and one way to quickly determine that is to just do certain kinds of legal queries, divorce lawyer, estates and trust, whatever the problem is. Just do those searches in Google and see who comes up. See what third-party directory sites come up. Those are the ones you need to be in for sure. They have a certain level of authority, and so you get a sort of a boost. You get an organic SEO boost by being on those sites because you're going to be found on those directories. But also Google uses them as in ranking your site. It's less clear that you need to be on some generic list of 100 directories because some of these are very vertical. Obviously healthcare, travel, restaurants. That's not going to make any difference to a lawyer. It really only matters on the vertical sites, and then the general sites like Yelp, for example. If you're in the United States and you're on Yelp and you have good reviews, that's going to be hugely valuable, not just for direct queries on Yelp, but also because Yelp is a very authoritative site that ranks for searches on Google as well.
Awesome. And one more for Maya, kind of a little bit more into as you were talking about, like the specifics with local SEO. Can you go a little bit more into like what prominence means and kind of how that plays into a local search campaign.
Definitely. So prominence, again, this kind of goes back to, we covered a lot of that into the online reputation and the reviews from our previous search sessions. But online reviews, like that's where the prominence section comes into it within the ranking guidelines. They are the second most important ranking factor. So quality and quantity do come into play. And I think I saw a question on like the where the diminishing returns comes into play. I don't know how to answer that one specifically, just because it is a little bit muddy. You obviously do want to get more reviews, and again, emphasis on authentic, genuine. You can't influence people to leave your review by saying, I'll give you a discount on this service, or you'll get $5 off on something else here. It has to be, you can encourage them through, there are multiple tactics on how you can do that. You can directly ask people to do it, but they can't be like can't coerce them into doing so. So going off that, I went off on a little tangent, but you do want to get as many reviews as possible that are genuine. And then from there, you have to balance out, like, how good of a service are you offering? That's like the positive review rating. 4 and 5 star reviews are excellent. The more 4 and 5 star reviews you have, the higher your click-through rate can be. And obviously your rankings in the local pack will improve as well. But knowing that you definitely can get some negative ones, it's not always going to go against you if you're taking the right measures to rectify that situation, and to respond appropriately. That was the word I was looking for there. And also just change it. If you're getting a lot of negative reviews, that does start to broach on your online reputation, and that should signal to you and what you need to be doing for your business to make it better as a whole. These reviews are coming in for a reason. How are you going to respond to them? That's going to be huge for you. But I don't think there's like a law of diminishing returns when it comes to it, because Google does want to have more, and they do want them to be quality as well. So I like to think of it from the sense of link building, where obviously you want more, but it's usually quality over quantity. It's similar in that sense. Go for quality, not just getting reviews for the sake of getting reviews, because you can run into some instances from there. But there's a lot of different tactics. I'll send you over some resources. We have a plethora of resources on some different tactics and strategies that you can test out and see what works best for you. What works well for one industry may not work well for another, because customers and your clients do differ across the board. So we'll send that over to you in our write-up in case that would be helpful for you to reference, and see what works for you, what starts to generate some more reviews, and where you can pivot from there. Did I answer that question correctly? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was perfect.
It's like there's so much to it, but let me know if I need to like dive into anything specific, or if you have any other additional questions from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Maya. And we're running up against the top of the hour, so we have a few more questions, but we will reach out to those people individually, make sure that we get your question answered. So thank you to all of those who sent in. And one that we did get that I just want to address from me personally is that, yes, this video will be available later this afternoon. We'll post it on boostability.com/search-sessions. And we'll also put it on our Boostability YouTube page. And then we'll send an email out later this week to all of those who attended the show, so you can have access to this again if you want to review it. So thanks again to Greg and to Maya for this. This has been so great and so helpful. So we hope you all have learned from that.
Yeah, there's always more questions than we have time for, and it's very challenging to work with Google. And I for all the people that have said they're frustrated or having difficulty, I'm sorry. And if you want to send me an email, greg.sterling@Uberall, I'll do my best to refer you to different information sources, and Boostability can too.
Perfect. Thank you, Greg. And as always, if you need help with your SEO or help growing your local search presence. That's exactly what we do here at Boostability. That's our specialty, is specifically helping small, medium-sized businesses, local businesses get found. So reach out to us, boostability.com, or give us a call. The phone number is there on the screen. And also be sure to check out boostability.com again /search-sessions for updates on our next show. It's coming up in August, and we'll post details about the registration link shortly. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.